Thanks for joining us and welcome to Hey, Let's Talk on Fridays. I'm Donnie Rolls and I'm joined by State Senator Dave Senjum and State Representative Kim Norton. So we knew that this was going to be a tough year. We've known that for the last couple years. That's not a surprise. But it's been reported that creditors have downgraded Minnesota because of fiscal policy gimmickry that's been going on for the past several years, according to a report that I just read in the Star Tribune. Was this common knowledge that not only was this year going to be tough because the last budget year we kind of pushed things off, but has it been known in the legislature that there's been sort of, I don't know, fiscal gimmickry going on for the last several years? And I'll start with you, Representative Norton.
Well, certainly we've known that we've been pushing the issues with our state budget on down the year by using funding shifts like education and some other one-time funds. So we've known this is coming. We certainly, I don't think any of us knew when the bond companies, the rating companies would make that change. And I think that was very concerning, not only for the state of Minnesota and our borrowing and bonding, and the impact that'll have on us financially, but also our cities and our counties and our school districts. It's detrimental to them as well because they rely on the soundness of our state budget to help them get good bond ratings as well.
And Senator Senjum, is it something?
Well, shifts and techniques like that have been, I think, somewhat historically used. There's, I think, always an embedded hope within the legislature, even governors, that these are small little times in history. And maybe just the example, 2000, for instance, 2003 to 2007, we went through difficult times, and we used shifts and so on and so forth. 2007, we arrived. We have a surplus. So, I think, always tend to believe that somehow the economy is going to improve to the point where you can pay back those shifts and go forward with a more robust economy and a so-called new prosperity. And I think that's obviously the hope now, that if we can make it through this time, that there will be better days and we can use these techniques without raising taxes and further encumbering people.
Okay. People have talked about something that I think a lot of Minnesotans might take for granted. I know I did, but the effect that a shutdown can have on sort of the national perspective of Minnesota. What do you guys think that the shutdown can do to people's perception of the state of Minnesota across the country? Representative Norton.
Well, I do think people are watching the news, and Minnesota's been in the news. I was just really sorry to see us on the New York Times, title page here recently with headlines. So I think people do watch. I also have noticed a little closer to home that we're starting to hear from students who are planning on coming to our schools whose parents are saying, well, maybe we should look elsewhere if there's a possibility that we can't go to school this fall at the university, or if even the effects of the cuts will cut programs that we're relying on, even in our state colleges. So I do think people are looking at the headlines, and it could impact the economy.
Okay. And Senator Senjum?
Well, I think these things aren't good. We don't want them. We want them resolved. But I think it's fair to say that as people look at Minnesota around the country, I'm not sure what the height of their emotion might be, but I suppose some people might question whether that Minnesota is a good place to live, do business in, visit, if you will. And so I think it may have some effect, but these are small bits of time in history, and I don't think anything like this is going to be terribly lasting.
When did you, and I'll start with you, Senator, when did you hear about former Governor Arne Carlson's plan to create this third group, this committee to come up with an alternate plan? When did you first hear about that? Was that Tuesday?
Probably so. The day it was announced, I didn't hear about it in any special way, over the news just like everybody else did. And from the standpoint of the approach, certainly welcome those kind of things if they can come together and offer up some recommendations. All ideas are fair. Representative Norton and I think we're at the stage within our kind of time here where we're welcoming anybody's idea, whether it's a commission's idea, whether it's a private citizen. So they offered their suggestions up yesterday. I'm not sure that I can articulate all of them, but I think the exercises are useful, and as we go through this process, there might be one or two that are used.
One or two of the ideas that they've come
Yeah.
up with. Okay. What do the parties think of this? I mean, is this seen as a sort of a negative from the leadership of both parties, Mr. Dayton as well as the Republican leadership? The idea being that, well, okay, the current leadership hasn't finished this, so we need to bring in somebody else. Is that looked at as a negative from the leadership's perspective?
Well, I think it certainly can reflect on leadership. I think to look at it a little differently, this was an opportunity to get some folks who are stuck in particular positions to take the step back from that and say, what does the general public think? What does the business sector think? And let them step forward and say, do these ideologies rule the day, or is there, if you take a broader perspective of what's best for Minnesota, do you get a different opinion? And I think that was what Governor Carlson had been trying to do. As Dave said, he just heard of it. I happened to attend a town hall meeting that the governor held. We were in session, the second to last week of session in May, and this was an idea he was suggesting even then. Let's bring together business leaders. Let's bring together former legislators. Let's bring folks to the table and see if they can come up with some other ideas that folks that are entrenched in particular ideologies maybe aren't willing to look at. And so I think that's the positive here, that we should, as Dave said, maybe every idea won't be taken, but certainly there are some ideas in there. And for me, the biggest aha was that they said we do need revenue and we do need cuts. We need both. And that was, I think, for me, the message that what those revenues will be, still needs to be discussed and agreed upon. Dave and I have had some talks about some things we agree about. We need to get enough of a group of legislators together that can agree on one thing to get something passed. But just the idea that revenue should be part of the picture was helpful. Okay,
and one of the things that was brought up in their plan was an income tax increase, a 4% temporary income tax increase on everybody. What were your thoughts on that?
From the standpoint of my thoughts, I think we still have to, in my belief, consider whether or not we can't live within the means of state government. In other words, the existing revenue streams. The idea that a 4% tax, and I'm not sure if that means 4% on the rate itself. In other words, 7.85 goes to 11.85. If that would be the case, it would be absolutely awful. We would lead the world, I think, in personal income tax. So, or whether it's a 4% on just that 7.85 plus 4%, and who knows what that makes it, whether it's 8% or whatever it might be. So I think there's just a lot of mystery about that right now, and I don't think it's been explained, at least to me. But in terms of the additional taxes, just in general, I don't think taxing income or taxing, frankly, production is what we ought to be doing right now. I think it's counterproductive to moving this economy forward.
Okay.
And I would say the 4% was a little startling to me too, and I don't know how to interpret that. We haven't really had the sit down for the details. We just heard about it like you did in the media, and we need a little more information. Again, I think that just the concept that we need more revenue, and again, what that will be. The governor's proposal the day before was for a 2% income tax surcharge on everyone, but it had a sunset of the year 2013, and so that might be a little more reasonable. Again, to me, it's just that the concept that revenue is needed and what that will look like, whether it be, as Dave said, some in his party still do not believe that taxing income is the way to do it, but it should be something else. And we've talked about sales taxes and other tobacco taxes that might be used instead. And so I'm waiting for those proposals to come forward from the other side to see if we can find enough people in both parties to agree to that.
Sure.
Can I just say, a couple of months ago, I think most people remember this, when Illinois went from a personal income tax of 3% to 5%. The whole nation was talking about it. Wisconsin was putting up highway signs, we're open for business. The idea that we would go to 11.85% against Illinois' 5%, which was a new tax that again, I think rocked the nation, at least in terms of interest. I think we just got to think about that and think about our competitiveness as a state.